And I know we've still got a few people still joining us, but I think we should probably kick off because we've tried to keep this a really short, impactful event. So we will get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think I know most of you, but just in case I don't, my name is Rebecca Groves, and I am the Skills and Talent Strategy Lead at Wired Sussex. So my job really is to work with our members to understand the challenges and the successes they have around attracting, training and retaining talent, and then working with them to develop projects and initiatives to help all of us to grow and to succeed. So I'm really pleased to be running this event with us today. I also have my colleague Hannah here, who many of you know, who's our Member Services Coordinator. And she's been helping a lot of you who've been posting jobs with us. So good morning from all of us at Wired Sussex. For those of you that haven't been to a breakfast session before, these events are really driven by member need. So we talk with our members a lot and understand what some of the pain points are that you have. And then we try to put events together to help connect you with other members that are doing great things so we can all learn from each other. It's slightly different, the format for this breakfast session. Normally the breakfast sessions are about an hour and a half, and we have a panel. But what we've tried to do as part of sort of embracing virtual events is to break that down. So we've got really short, impactful half-hour sessions. So that's how we're going to be running this morning. And the focus for the event this morning is looking at recruiting during lockdown, recruiting remotely. And really, that came from an assumption that I had initially, that thinking that maybe people weren't recruiting because they didn't have a need during lockdown to be bringing on new talent. But actually, when I was speaking with members, what I found was that there was some sort of anxieties and some uncertainties around the process of recruiting remotely. So we spoke with some of our members who had been quite successful in that process. And they've kindly offered to run a series of events with us, looking at recruiting and onboarding during lockdown, and potentially past that, because a lot of companies have found that this has been quite a liberating way of attracting people from all over the country. So it's really interesting to sort of share and learn those stories. The way that the event will work is I was going to get everyone to introduce themselves, but for speed, we're not going to sort of do a round table, but there's a chat function in Google. So there's a little speech bubble at your top right. So if you want to pop your name and where you're from in there, then please feel free to introduce yourself that way. But I'll probably kick off now with some questions. I'll introduce our speaker, Sam. We'll kick off with some questions, and then I'll open it up for a discussion with the rest of the group. Does anyone have any questions before we begin? Perfect. Oh, I should also say that we are recording this event. If anyone has any issue with that, then give me a heads up, or feel free to put yourself on so you're not seen on the camera. So without further ado, I'm going to pass across to, well, not pass across, I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, which is Sam, who is the CEO of Anything is Possible, which is one of our member companies. Sam, do you want to just take a moment to introduce what Anything Possible is and tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. So I'm Sam, CEO and co-founder of Anything is Possible. I've recognised some faces on the 9 or so on the screen, but I know there's a lot more behind the screen. So it'd be great to meet you in person. One of the highlights of Wired Sussex is usually meeting at what I still call audio, but that's because I'm old-fashioned. I don't know what it's called now, patterns for the Wired Sussex meetup. So it'd be nice to meet you face-to-face one day, hopefully in the not-too-distant future. But you can always reach me, so drop me a line at sam@aip.media. So we are a media planning and buying creative and technology agency. We founded the business in the shed that Rebecca was admiring earlier on before many of you joined, but in the shed that I built in my garden 2 years ago, and I never thought that I'd be back in that shed so quickly. But thankfully it wasn't for any kind of bad news stories, well, from the business anyway. But so we're a media planning and buying agency, 2 years old, based on Trafalgar Street in Brighton. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey since we launched. We started, just my partner and I, Mark. We both worked together at another Brighton business, iCrossing, for 10 years. And we were just kind of moseying on in the shed. And then we joined a thing called the NatWest Accelerator. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Some of you probably are. So it's a really good scheme up in Preston Park where they provide business coaching, support and office space for startups. So we moved in there, hired our first hire person, Rob, who's still with us, in October. And since then, that was October, what year are we? 2018. So we've now grown to 20 full-time. When you look at the part-time, we're up to about 24. So it's been a really rapid growth journey, and actually 6 of those have joined us since lockdown, which has been a somewhat scary experience, I suppose. But yeah, so that's us. We kind of specialize in digital marketing, offline media. That's our strongest part. We also do SEO, all of the stuff you'd expect of a media agency.
Fantastic. And so you've sort of recruited those 6 roles during lockdown. Could you sort of pull out maybe some of the maybe assumptions that you had before you started that process, and maybe any of the challenges that you faced going through that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first couple of weeks of lockdown were pretty dark. I think from just a general societal perspective and business perspective, we didn't know what was going on. So the biggest thing was dealing with the uncertainty. You know, I think your assumption is a fair one, that people don't need to recruit. I think the danger is that it's not that people didn't need to recruit, but in an uncertain market, it's very difficult to bring people on board when you're not so certain of the revenue that's going to come into the business to fund it. So that was the big first challenge that we had to overcome. Some of those were already in place, so we'd offered some jobs, and we looked at it whether we needed to, you know, pull those offers or change those offers, which we didn't, which was great. Once we kind of got over that uncertainty, we realised that actually we needed to kind of push on and make sure that we didn't slow down in our recruitment process. So then it was really thinking about, well, how can we do that to the same level of the same kind of levels of standards that we would apply to our standard recruitment process when people would meet us face to face. And it's always been really important to us because, you know, one of our objectives is to be the most desirable company to work at in Brighton. And, you know, you do that through the culture, you do that through kind of getting to know someone, you do that through the office experience, all of those things which are taken away from you. And however nice this is to see all of your front rooms and bedrooms and kitchens on Google Hangouts, it's a bit weird. You know, it's quite hard to get, you know, a true interaction with each of you and to get the feedback and to build that rapport that actually is so important when you're, you know, deciding on bringing someone into your business, you know. And for us, like, you know, we often talk about it, but, you know, every hire we've been making, you know, it's now in single digits, but at the time when we were doing it, it was, you know, double-digit percentage of the company. So, you know, you get that wrong, it's quite a large part of the company that's wrong. You haven't got the kind of the scale to be able to absorb bad hires. So it was a bit of a concern for us. It's transpired that it's actually been okay. I don't know, we've all become professionals at this, I suppose. It is still weird, don't get me wrong. Like, I feel exhausted after every Zoom meeting or Hangout meeting. I'll be knackered by 9:30 today. But you know, it's less weird getting to know someone now, and you know, you are able to see kind of, I guess, a little bit more humanity. So, you know, I was going to say my dog Nelson could run in at any time now, and like, you wouldn't get that in an interview. You know, when someone goes into an office, you put up your interview shield and it's the best version of you. But in your bedroom at home, when the dog's barking, there's a knock at the door for an Amazon delivery and the baby's crying, you kind of see a different side to people, which is actually really quite beneficial, I think, compared to what you would normally get, you know?
Yeah, because I think when you were talking about getting that sense of rapport, did you find that was something, did you develop ways to sort of instigate that, or sort of to get a sense of a candidate remotely? I know there's those sort of like insights from seeing inside their lives, I suppose, but were there any sort of things that you, were there any processes or any tools that you used, or questions that you asked to try and get a sense of that person?
I think that the biggest one was to reduce the number of people on an interview. So I think that normally maybe we would have, I mean, it's not, we try and keep it to 3 because we wanted to have, you know, a cross range of people in the business. So we would typically have myself and my co-founder Mark, and then someone from, you know, the team that they would join. But it's very difficult to have 3 people interviewing one person virtually, because it's really awkward. It's cool when you're all on mute, but you know, if we had all of our mics open, it'd be really awkward because everyone would be trying to talk and talking over each other. So that's something which, you know, because you can't read each other's body language and know when someone's about to finish, someone always goes on. It makes it a bit awkward. So I think what we did there was, you know, kind of cut those numbers down. And so similar to how you're running today's session, actually, you know, an hour and a half interview doesn't work online. I mean, that is terrible. But a half-hour chat, maybe with 3 different people spread over 3 different sessions, I think is a better way. So that I think is the biggest change. We didn't really necessarily change what we did. Perhaps we have made it a bit more conversational and a little less formal, perhaps. I think that wasn't necessarily a conscious thing. But I think the nature of having one-on-one sessions, and a few of them, meant that you're actually building up a bit more of a relationship over time. So that naturally happens.
And then once that person sort of has started, I don't sort of go too far into the onboarding, but sort of practically, do you give yourself more sort of our probation periods extended? Has there sort of been any practical implications on that side?
Well, that's the bit that's the bit that's been a nightmare, because we're not big enough to have an IT team. And in my previous companies, I always underappreciated IT. It was harsh for me at the time. But you know, they're the ones who just get stuff done. And your laptop goes wrong, or you need a new laptop for a new team member, it gets done. Now I'm like, oh my God, how do I get a laptop to someone who's socially distanced? We need to get the laptop with all of the kind of admin tools on before that they can get it. And so that's been the thing that logistically has been the hardest. My recommendations are Google Chromebooks. They're brilliant because you can just log in with your Google account. You don't have to worry about it, but that's probably for the IT breakfast. But in terms of onboarding, we hadn't really planned. So I suppose it's good to rewind a little bit. So when we launched the business, we have a policy called Anywhere is Possible. And the idea of that is, well, it's pretty obvious, but it means you can work from anywhere in the world. So in fact, our first hire, Rob, who's literally just got back from Australia, he wanted to travel Australia for a year. So we enabled him to do it and work full time whilst traveling. So that means we've always had an element of remote working in place. So our systems are built for that. But the onboarding has been designed around face-to-face contact. So we have a load of sessions that, you know, I do a session with the introduction to the business, and my partner does certain different sessions. They're all transferable, and that's fine. I guess it's the kind of the conversational bits that are missing a little bit. So we will have regular meetings like this, but you know, 2 new hires might not have spoken one-to-one. That's the thing that we've been thinking about and haven't necessarily sold, of how do you get new people coming into the business to build individual positive relationships with other new people coming into the business, rather than us all building a kind of almost hierarchical relationship via the management and the business, you know?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. It's great to see questions are actually starting to pop up in the chat. So I think that's probably a sign that I have asked enough of my questions. There's a question from James. I'll read it out and then I'll open it up sort of widely. If anyone has a question, if you want to just give me a wave, I can hand across to you. But James has just posted a question to say, I feel like I'm a radio presenter. We've got a question from James. He says, hi, Sam. Have you used questions or case studies that the candidate needs to prepare for beforehand?
Yes, that's been a standard that we do for all roles. And we have modified them slightly, I think, in terms of the length and the depth we ask candidates to go into. So just to put, like, if we might have a multi-stage interview process, depending on the role, it could be up to 3 stages. in that final stage, typically there would be a series of presentations or case studies that the candidate would review. It could be 3, and they could be around 15 minutes each. So that's like 45 minutes. We think that's just too much to do in this environment. So we've cut those down. So we've either dropped some or reduced the scope. So we still do it, but we try and keep those presentations shorter and more on point. And I don't know if everyone has presented on Hangouts or Zoom. It's quite a lonely place because you lose all of the faces, you know, and it feels really isolated when you're looking at your own slides, talking. No one's feeding back because of the weirdness of it. No one really kind of interjects and stuff like that. So it's quite brutal, much more brutal than it would be, I think, if you were in the room. So I think it's more for us to understand their ability to respond to a brief, solve a problem. You know, in our world, designing slides is a big thing. So you need to kind of understand that and craft a narrative and stuff like that. Where it's harder to judge some of the presentation skills.
I'm going to read these questions out, might be easier, but if you would like to ask the question yourself, put that in the notes. So Sam said, Nick said, have you extended the probation period due to the unusual circumstances?
That's a good question. We haven't. We did look at it when we, the darkest couple of weeks of lockdown were the immediate couple of weeks after. And so our clients, our business basically is buying advertising for our clients. And so some of our clients are people like the Kew Gardens and the Wave, which is a big surf destination in Bristol. Excuse me. They had to close. So they paused their advertising. And as the whole advertiser sector shrunk, double digits. So at that stage, we were looking at a bit of an uncertain horizon. So we were looking at potentially doing that. But we've got a bit more certainty in the business now, and our probation periods were pretty standard 3 months. We've got a whole onboarding process, which if we don't know that they're a good fit for the business in 3 months, we've done something wrong. And if they're a good fit for the business, then we want them in the business. So we're confident in our horizon that we can deal with that. So I don't think extending probation is a good way to go. I think that if there's uncertainty around, I don't know, you've got to play it. But for us, the only reason why someone wouldn't make probation if they weren't good enough, and we'll know that within the first 3 months.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Also, Michael's said, just to check, going back to sort of your interview process, so you have a one-to-one with the candidate, and then the next person on the panel, and then the other people who'd be on the panel, they would also do one-to-ones. Is that the case until everyone who would have been on that panel has had a one-to-one, and then you sort of compare notes after that? Is that?
Yeah, sometimes there'll be 2. So we might have two from AIP and one candidate. But yeah, that's right. And that has its issues because the candidate answers the same question a lot. There's a lot of duplication between the sessions, and that's difficult to avoid. You try and keep that duplication less of an issue by changing who they meet, right? So me as a founder has a different set of questions to Lily in our strategy team, who's going to work as a colleague. So that does help, but inevitably there is duplication. But at the same time, they meet people on a more personal level. They get a better feel for the business, because it's really important for us that they understand who we are, and get an understanding of what we might be like when we come out of lockdown as well. Because that's the interesting thing, isn't it? They're joining a company in a very unusual situation. We could be completely different when we're back in the office. So you want them to try and understand as much about us as possible. So yeah, I'd recommend, that would be my big tip, I think, is to try and do more shorter interviews with a range of people, rather than if you were doing panel-based interviews previously.
Great, thank you. And then Daniela said, what challenges have new starters faced when starting a new role remotely, and how have you overcome those challenges?
Well, I mentioned the laptop issue. I think there's been a couple of times where Currys hasn't delivered it in time. So but luckily everyone's used their own laptop, which hasn't been okay. I mean, the one thing that I would say is people are, and I think generally in the world anyway, a lot very understanding of the challenging circumstances. And we're not a slick business. We're a startup, 2 years old, and we have our, warts and all. We're still developing and growing up. So it hasn't been super slick as if we were a fully remote organisation. So they've understood that. I think the biggest challenges that we've seen generally, I think as an organisation that isn't a fully remote working business, is that people miss the contact. And for new starters, particularly who are perhaps more junior in their careers, that isolation can be quite difficult, very difficult to pick up on, kind of on the job learning, because, it's just a little thing. So, there's a barrier to call your manager. So if you were sat next to each other, you would say, sorry, can I just ask you a question? How do I do this? And there's no barrier to that, but there's a bit of a barrier to phone them on Slack or set up a Google Hangout. You're really interrupting their day, and you might see that they're in meetings. So that's a difficulty, I think. And I don't really know how to solve that properly, because, we have organised training sessions, but it's been tough to get that kind of non-organised communication flowing. We use Slack, lots of pinging and stuff like that, but even that, Slack can become, I don't know if everyone's using Slack, but that, your notifications can build up, and if you ignore it for 20 minutes, suddenly you've got 30 notifications, and it can be quite problematic. So we're thinking about how one of the challenges, or one of the opportunities, is how do you create a remote culture where you can enable that kind of natural conversational relationship building, because I think that's the gap. I don't know the answers. I'd be interested in other people's thoughts on that. But yeah, that's the biggest challenge, I think, for people coming on board at a junior level. For more senior hires, they're usually more autonomous, and they're able to deal with it, and they're more confident to ask questions if they don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that sort of point of building that sort of office rapport and that onboarding and then culture piece is something that we're going to explore a little bit more in the session next week. So you're very welcome to hopefully for that. But I think that's particularly key to that. Once you've locked in this great talent, onboarding them and sort of supporting them in a way that that provides what both you and the new employee needs. Yeah. A question from Adam was, based on the uncertainty, have you gone straight for full-time recruits, or are you recruiting more sort of part-time or freelance positions?
So that's a good question. Probably not what you're expecting me to answer, but we did reduce our contractors and freelancers as a result of the COVID situation. So at lockdown, because our work dropped, we did cut that and reduced our freelancer costs. But now we've moved into full-time recruits. So we've actually brought on the 6 people we've brought on, and we've got 2 more roles that we're recruiting for are all full-time. And the way we see it is that, so we always knew that we wanted to double in size this year, and we're on track for that. But in terms of the employment market, I don't think there's ever been a situation like this. There's never been such a significant input of talent into the market that are open to roles, because so many people have been put on furlough, so many industries and companies have been affected negatively that they may be being redundant. So actually the market from an employer's perspective is really buoyant. You've got fantastic people. The quality of candidates that we've had for all the roles have been 4 or 5 times better than when we've been recruited in the past. Normally we'd have to get recruitment agencies involved to find candidates. It'd be really tough. We'd be fighting for it, and actually it's been completely different. So the way we see it is that we're in a position to recruit, and actually this is fantastic because we've got such a high talent pool in Brighton who are available, much more so than a normal market dynamics where actually people are more secure in their jobs and not looking to move. It's much harder to get that. So any business that can recruit now, I think it's a huge opportunity to get great people on and into your organisation quickly, and that will lead to an opportunity to grow quicker in the future. So that's why we're doing that. You've got to balance it with a little bit of risk around uncertainty, but that's the nature of the decisions you've got to make.
Thank you. I'm really aware of the time, and I know that I was saying that this should be sort of a short half hour. So before we sort of wrap up, Sam, is there anything that I or any of the attendees haven't asked that you thought would have been sort of important to share?
No, I mean, I think that was good fun.
That sounded like an interview question.
It did, yeah. Have you any questions for us? I should have prepped. No, I mean, it was good. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear, as I say, like, it's a bit weird in an environment like this to have a chat, but, it'd be great to share stories and war wounds and all that sort of stuff. So, if anyone wants to get in touch and have a chat, as I say, you can drop me an email and have it and discuss that way. But it'd be good to hear kind of how everyone else is getting on, and any tips that could come back our way as well, because, the more sharing, the better.
Well, that seamlessly, I didn't set you up for this, so that seamlessly leads us into a final thing I was going to say, which is that it is actually our members meetup tonight. I know, Sam, you were talking about how much you enjoyed the members meetup. It isn't on the seafront in the sunshine, but it is going to be on Hopin, which is a new platform that we've been experimenting with, and it should still be a really great opportunity for us all to sort of reconnect and chat with each other. So I'll send in a link after this, so if anyone wants to come along to that, you're very welcome to. Also, as I'd mentioned, there is another one of these breakfast sessions next Thursday, which is looking specifically at the onboarding process. And as I said, my colleague Hannah was joining us today, so I think many of you know her anyway, but if after this you are inspired to recruit, I think Sam did a great job of sort of covering some of the benefits of the moment, particularly around sort of the talent that is available. So if anyone is looking to recruit, please have a chat with Hannah. So I think that just leaves me to thank Sam and his colleague Rob for their time today. A big thanks to Plus Accounting, who are sponsoring these breakfast sessions so that we can sort of have this platform to talk to each other. And a big thanks to everyone for joining us. So thank you. I'm going to stick on this. I'm going to stop recording and I'm going to stay on here for probably the next sort of 10 minutes or so. So if anyone does have any questions that they haven't been able to cover, then feel free to ask me. Otherwise, I hope you have a lovely day and hopefully see you next year.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.